We go in depth on the Tesla Model 3 next on Talking Cars. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode. I'm Mike Monticello.
I'm Jake Fisher.
I'm Gabe Shanhauer.
And today we're going to take a deep dive into our latest test car that we bought, which is the all-new Tesla Model 3. Now there's been a lot of hype about this car, whether it's from Tesla or Elon Musk himself or other publications throughout the country that have already written quite a lot about it. But here at Consumer Reports, we don't care about the hype. We care about telling people what is it like to drive this car, what is it like to deal with that giant screen that controls everything basically inside the car. But let's take a step back for a second and first talk about how we bought this car, because we have a pretty early Model 3. There aren't very many of these out there yet. To do that, it required, outfitting the car a certain way. And Gabe, I was hoping you could explain that to us, because this isn't a $35,000 Model 3. This is a $59,000 Model 3.
Exactly. So the first ones they're producing are the long-range ones. Long-range meaning it has a 310 mile of rated range. Interestingly, they don't tell you the size of the battery, unlike with the Model S. So, just estimating it, we think it's about 80 kilowatt hour battery. Anyway, also, we got the premium package and the autopilot, and all of that adds a few $1,000s, and then paint. If it's not black, it's another $1,000. So all in all, $59,000. So yeah, so much for $35,000 affordable.
And we basically had to buy that though, right? I mean, this is the early production. I could think they call them first production cars. You have to get them a certain way or you're going to get further back on the list. Yeah. Is that correct?
That's totally correct. But one more thing to put things in perspective. When you look at other cars that Tesla thinks are competitors, like a BMW Model 3, BMW 3 Series or Audi A4, they also start at about $35,000, and very quickly with some options, they become $50,000 cars.
Well, just one thing I want to point out is that also when you look at those vehicles, especially in the Northeast, a lot of them are all-wheel drive, right. And this will have an all-wheel drive option, but that's not available right now.
Right.
So even though we spent $59,000, not $35,000, we still didn't get all-wheel drive,
we didn't get the exact car we wanted, is what you're saying.
We really wanted an all-wheel drive vehicle because that's really everything else that's in that category.
And there's going to be, another car. There's going to be the regular batteries coming later. That's 220 miles of estimated range at this point. I don't think the EPA has rated that yet, so that's coming later.
Right. Theoretically, soon you'll be able to actually get a $35,000 car.
Right.
And
as long as it's black.
Right.
Right.
But enough about that. We said we were going to talk about what this car is like to drive. So, Jake, you spent a night or two in it. What's it like to drive this thing?
Well, early impressions. Driving the car, a lot of people don't talk about the way it drives, right? They're talking about all this other kind of stuff around it. And it drives really well.
Yeah.
It's kind of I feel like it's the untold story. But, the steering feel is great. It's very responsive. It's very... the Model S, we've talked about the Model S. With the big battery in the bottom, it's, really planted.
Low center of gravity.
Low center of gravity, all that stuff. And, you take that and you kind of squeeze it down to a smaller vehicle. It's even more nimble. It even feels more energetic. There's still problems with it. The ride is a little bit stiff. It's a bit of a wind noise when you're driving it, but for the most part, it's pretty quiet and it's really fun to drive.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I was really surprised. When you first get in the car, I was just taken by how good the driving position is. Right. You've got the screen over there, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. So there's no instrument panel, and you've got this, small diameter, thick rim steering wheel. It just feels really sporty, and turns out the car is very sporty.
Right.
It's got a really nice left footrest or dead pedal, great, armrest. So you've got this expansive windshield. You've got this pretty good view out, even though I can't really see the hood because it slopes down so much. I've got what feels like a commanding view of this.
Well, it's probably closer to something like a Boxster or something.
Yeah.
Porsche Boxster.
That's what it sort of felt like, or an NSX or something like that.
Right. You get this really low cal because you don't have any engine up there, and you have a tiny steering wheel because you don't need to see anything through it.
Right.
It's kind of neat to drive.
Right.
Yeah.
Gabe, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. The car is fun to drive because the handling is so nimble. Feels like a car that doesn't have any engine weight over the front axle, so everything is very immediate. The responses are so electric, no pun intended.
But
yeah, so that part is really enjoyable, but I agree with Jake. The ride is too stiff, and the wind noise at highway speeds, that's a little excessive. And it's kind of strange, especially at night, not to see anything in front of you instead of an instrument panel.
It felt to me sometimes like I was driving a concept car. I've never driven a concept car, but it felt like with there's wood in front of me and these kind of like layers of panels. It felt like what it might be like to drive a concept car, from a car show.
Cross between that and like a Barbie Jeep, it's kind of like it seemed very different. I mean, we drive so many cars; it definitely felt very different.
Right. Yeah, I was really impressed by the handling. Of course, and also the other thing that you're always impressed with an electric car is that you get its full torque immediately. So that the most thrilling thing about an electric car to me really is that initial acceleration.
Yeah,
because you get everything at once, and it's really fun. I mean, it's not to the level of a Model S or something like that, which is really fast. But it's still pretty good.
Yeah, it's the thrust is just ready, right there at the ready, and it's very enjoyable.
Now, I think you guys both brought up wind noise. There was another issue that I found, I'm sure you guys found it too, was if you sit in the rear seat. I mean, that's one of the less good rear seats in this segment. And this is a segment we're talking about BMW 3 Series, Audi A4, Infiniti Q50, Mercedes-Benz C-Class. Am I right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
And so with, I can't really show them now, but the seat is so low, and I'm thinking maybe that's so that there's decent headroom, that your knees are like up into your chest somewhat, and there's also limited foot space underneath. There's good knee room, but the foot space is limited under those seats.
The rear glass, right? I mean, it kind of goes all the way above the rear driver or the rear passenger seat, so it goes way up there. And look, they kind of make it kind of coupe-like, and they slope it way down. And if they actually had a seat that was higher, an adult's head would be into the glass, which would be a bad thing. Right. So what they've done is they made the seat like way low. It's almost like a third row seat in some SUVs or something.
Yeah.
And your knees are. I mean, look, my kids they're happy back there, and maybe a lot of people are like happy that they're in a Tesla. But but unfortunately, comfort it can't hold a candle to the competitors.
I don't think.
I mean, the least they could have done is slope the seat a little bit, to lower the rear, raise the front of it, and give you some at least partial thigh support.
There's no
zero thigh support there. Yeah.
So we're talking about the Tesla Model 3. We're talking about.
But I do want to say something.
Comfort.
But since we're talking about the rear seat,
how about cup holders? Cup holders?
They're good.
Listen to this though. You'll like this. I put the rear seats down and was able to put my mountain bike in the back. Full suspension 29-inch mountain bike. I had to take the front wheel off, as you would with any sedan in this category. But it fit in no problem. The pass-through is actually really quite good.
Have you tried to put it in the Model X?
Oh, Model X, I can't even do it.
You can't do it on Model X.
This is better than the Model X.
Or at least our Model X, the way it's configured. Yeah.
But so that's enough about rear seat stuff. Let's get on
cup
to
holders.
The other
what people
thing.
Really
Forget the cup holders, Jake. Let's talk about that giant screen, because it's a 15-inch screen. It basically controls everything within the car, just about everything. There's almost no controls anywhere else. So what did you think of this screen, Jake? Good, bad?
Before we actually drove this car and owned this car, we haven't been in one. And there's been a lot of talking about, look, you look at the pictures, right? It's over here. It doesn't look that. To be honest with you, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And that's kind of a weird way of saying.
Is that praise? I don't know.
It's kind of like, very, very faint praise. But honestly, it's not that bad, because look, first of all, it's not like it's over here, because you can't really tell from the pictures.
Right.
It's basically right where your right hand is, and that's where you see the speedometer. So in terms of like actually accessing and seeing it, it's not that horrible. I think the problem is
still not great.
Not
praise.
that horrible. No, I mean, there's a bit of getting used to it. I think the bigger problem is just so many things in it. And I think probably the things that are really annoying is probably when you look at things like, the cruise control, right?
Right.
And you want to like make it faster.
Ridiculous.
You have to go in and find the little spot and press that, and that's kind of
in most cars these days.
Insane.
This is where your hands are, right?
Yeah.
And you to do the cruise control up and down speed, it's right here. All you're doing is
stock.
For those of you that are listening to the show instead of watching, I'm showing how you would do a cruise control with your thumb.
Right.
Right. And here you have to go like this. And let's also keep in mind, we already said that the ride is kind of stiff. So sometimes you're trying to hit the screen and it's hard to hit things.
I mean, most of the things that are in there, I think it works out okay. I mean, there's some weird stuff because, like, for instance, you're just adjusting the steering wheel. right?
Yeah.
That control, you have to get into the screen.
And
for
the
that.
mirrors.
The mirrors, you got to get into that. But you're not really adjusting those all the time. You could adjust those, and there's a setting, and then there's a Jake setting, and there's a Gabe setting, and that works out okay.
Yeah, there's no mic setting yet.
Well, I think you could get on that. But I think, some of the things that you're using while you're driving, that is going to be
Well, let me ask you this, Gabe.
problematic.
Do you see it as a safety issue, a potential safety issue with everything being over here instead of here? I mean, safety issue, and also, why not a head-up display?
Well, potentially, yes. And there are, like Jake said, there's so much information there, and a lot of the things, I mean, it's so often and so frequently that you take your eye off the road just to look at it. I mean, okay, the speed is right there, and that's not too bad, but the range is a tiny font, and it's an electric car. You want to know the range all the time.
Right.
Other commonly used things like time and temperature, that's way off to the right and tiny font. So, and it always shows you the map, the navigation map. I mean, at least in the S, you can choose what you want to see. You want to see more radio, you can do that up
you could
top.
bring the radio up.
But seeing the map all the time, I mean, come on. I mean, most of the time I know exactly where I'm going. I don't need that.
Right.
So, about head-up display. I mean, this car is crying for a head-up display.
A head-up display would be terrific.
And that would be terrific.
Yeah. But what I was going to say, not only is it crying for a head-up display, but I mean, it seems like head-up displays are kind of, a little bit futuristic. You'd think that this car of any car would have something like that, where everything is up on the screen right in front of you, like a fighter jet or something.
Here's the problem. So, like, I was at CES,
Consumer Electronics
Consumer Electronics Show, and they have all these cars, and it's like big screens, giant screens, and they're showing cars that have like basically a display that goes completely across the dashboard, and even you look at some of the cars that we have, look at Audi, and you look underneath, you look in your gauges, and there's like Google, Earth going on. There's something to be said about simplicity, because some of the cars, there is so much information. I mean, it's like, I need to know my range right now. I need to know my time right now. I need to know all these things. Like, at some level, maybe you just need to drive the car. And the thing is that by putting all that stuff, and it's like, the truth is you shouldn't be looking at that stuff all the time.
Right.
You should look at it occasionally. And maybe, you don't need to know all this stuff right away. You should just concentrate on driving. And another piece of putting that stuff on the side is autopilot. Now, one of the things that we've always talked about autopilot is,
that was next on my list.
Well, we don't need this anymore. But the problem with autopilot is some people kind of abuse this.
Well,
right?
First, just for people who don't know, just explain what autopilot
is. Autopilot is, it's a system that you turn the thing on, and it will steer the wheel for you, and it will adjust speed for you. However, you still need to pay attention where you're going.
So, like adaptive cruise control with steering assist,
with steering assist, but steering actually follows the lanes.
Right. Okay.
Now, the problem with this is that for up to a minute, you can actually take your hands off the wheel. You're not supposed to, and they tell you not to, but it will go and steer for you.
Right.
And the problem is that a lot of people kind of get into this kind of, okay, we'll let the thing steer, and when it tells you to put your hands on the wheel, you give it a little tug, and then you take your hands off.
Right.
You really can't do this with this car.
Yeah, they can't game the system.
You can't really game the system, and the reason is because those alerts that say put your hand back on the wheel are kind of off to the side. So you kind of relearn how to use autopilot, and it's probably going to be people who have Teslas are going to be upset about this.
Okay.
But I think if you're actually getting into this new, you're going to wind up using the thing how it is designed, which is actually putting your hands on the wheel, paying attention where you're driving, because you can't game that system that way.
Right. Well, and if you use the lane change, if you use your turn signal to change lanes, then it'll change the lanes for you. It actually extends that period of time that you don't have to touch the wheel. But I mean, obviously, you should be touching the wheel.
You should be. And the thing is, when you go to the turn signal, I mean, again, it knows that you're being involved in the driving situation. So it kind of makes sense, right? If you're turning the signal, you're paying attention. The problem is it's letting it do its thing.
Right.
And then playing with that big screen.
Speaking of autopilot, though, Gabe, I mean, it's kind of a little bit back and forth. I mean, is this the same as we've seen with the S and the X, or is it better or worse?
Very similar. So some of the during curves, it's a little late, and some of the steering adjustments tend to be a little abrupt. And at least for my comfort level, it keeps me way too close to the guardrail or the margin, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I would say it's similar to the S. So we have an X and we have an S, and the Model X is the older system, the newer Hardware 2 and Hardware 2.5. I think it seems very similar to that.
I don't want to brag, but I had a friend of mine in the car last night, and I said, this thing's a little abrupt. She goes, oh, was that the car doing that? She goes, you're way smoother than that.
Wow.
So I don't want to brag, but apparently I'm a smooth driver. At least compared to the Model 3's autopilot.
You'll take the compliment.
Yeah. Now, this Model 3 has some other, let's call them sort of oddities that are kind of unique to this car. And one of those is this slim little key card that is actually kind of like, instead of a key or a key fob, you have basically like a thin little credit card that you can use to unlock the car, and then you just put it in the car and you drive the car. Or you can also use an app on your phone, and it'll take care of everything. And the app is actually easier, I think. But what do you think about that?
I think it's really designed for using your phone.
Okay.
That's really what they've decided to do. They said, you know what? We're not going to give you a key. Everyone who's buying one of these things is going to have a smartphone, and we're going to tie it to your smartphone, and it works like a proximity key. So as you approach the car with your smartphone,
you don't have to do anything.
You don't have to do anything.
But without the phone, if you don't have the app and you haven't enabled the keyless driving, it's a total pain because you have to tap that card near the cup holder to start the car. That's a pain. I mean, locking and unlocking also. So it just you have to have the app and enable keyless driving.
If you don't have a smartphone, just don't buy it because it's almost
don't
like
shun the non-smartphone people.
Don't buy another car. But I mean, but yeah, Gabe's totally right. I mean, this thing, it's almost like the emergency if your smartphone dies.
Yeah.
It's a little bit hokey.
Okay.
But if you do have a smartphone, it's a great car.
Okay.
The other thing about smartphones, I'm sorry, I'm going to go off your list, but the other thing is
not on there.
But it actually gives you this is controversial. It gives you a really good place to put your smartphone.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of cars don't do this because, well, you probably shouldn't be looking at your smartphone while you're driving.
The first car I've been in where it has a really good spot to just take the phone and put it right there and it doesn't move.
Right.
You can actually put a couple next to each other.
And there's a cover on it so you can stop making it so you are less distracted. You could just look at the big screen.
Right. So yeah, you can rest your phone there, and if you look at Waze, for instance, it's pretty convenient instead of having it attached to the dash or something.
Yeah. And speaking of getting in and out of the car, what about those wacky door handles?
They're pretty wacky. So first of all, to exit, it's like a Corvette. It's an electric kind of thing, and actually, my wife had no problem. I didn't prompt her or anything.
I didn't mind
She
that.
knew exactly what to do, and but the outside door handles are much more wacky.
Yeah.
Because they kind of pivot. They're flush with the body, like in the S, but they don't come out at you as you approach the car. So that's a little too bad.
Yeah. Why?
Why can't they just do a normal door handle? Like every Tesla, right? I mean, the Tesla Model S came out and had these hokey door handles, which broke quite a bit. Then they changed them again on the Model X. And now we have a new mechanism that also doesn't quite make sense. Because it's weird. You have to push in and then pull out from you almost need like two hands if you have small hands. And
I think it happens almost opposite of the way every other door handle works, right? Usually you kind of pull this way or
pushing
and
in
this
to
way
pull out.
Yeah, it's just.
And here's the crazy thing. It's like there's a lot of neat stuff always about Tesla because they seem to kind of reinvent things, right? They're like, hey, well, we don't really need to have a start button. That makes sense, right? I like that. So it's good to change things to make things better. But the door handles, they keep on changing things that don't need to be changed, and they wind up worse. Like, don't stop doing that.
Right. I want to emphasize this is what maybe you call a really early first drive. So these aren't our final say on anything really about this car.
We may drive it more.
We're definitely going to drive it more. We're going to put it through our full test program. But I'm going to put you guys on the spot right now. Jake? If you had one word to describe what you think so far about the Model 3, what is it? One word.
Innovative.
Okay. Gabe?
Certainly unusual, but I don't know. I need to warm up to it.
Need more time.
Yeah.
All right. For me, I'd say promising, but probably not for me. There's something lacking in I don't get a charge.
Oh my God.
Out of electric cars because they lack the visceralness, if that's a word, I like a nice exhaust sound, decelerative burbling from an exhaust when you're coming up to a stop sign. We put aftermarket exhaust systems on cars for a reason because we love the way they sounded. And while there's some excitement to going really fast in the car, when you take off from a stop and this car handles great, but the rest of the time it's like driving a computer, you know what I mean? So I miss I miss the sound of a good old internal combustion engine.
You're old.
No, I'm old. I'm old.
I hear you.
It's fun. It's fun. I mean, it's more like playing a video game. You know?
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
Which is got positives and negatives.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. We want to hear what you think, though. You've heard what we think about the Model 3. After hearing what we said, would you want to buy this car or not? And if you're one of the hundreds of thousands that have already put down a deposit, tell us that too. So to do this, send us a 30-second video to consumerreports.org/talkingcars. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.